name is Dr. Rachel Bussman, and I'm a clinical psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. During the coronavirus crisis, our telehealth resources include diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, 30-minute phone consultations, bereavement and grief support, remote neuropsychological evaluations, and this is just a sample. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. Today, we're talking about anxiety, and we're also talking about anxiety related to reopening. And so some of you have actually already sent your questions, which is great, and I'm excited to answer those. And you can absolutely send those questions as we are continuing to stream so that I can answer those for you. So the first question that I will answer is actually was a comment that was posted, which said, what about anxious adults? And I actually think it's a really good point, which I think was maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but probably not, because I think we're really thinking about children, and we're also thinking about adults. And so we're really all anxious right now. And it's really important to keep in mind how important it is to be aware of our own emotional reactions. So actually, I'd like to start there with just, what about anxious adults? And we'll say that, when we think about reopening, and it's hard to categorize reopening as a universal thing, because obviously Child Mind is borderless, so we're probably reaching people in all different places, and everyone's doing something a little bit different. But reopening to me means maybe loosening some of those social distancing restrictions or starting to open things up that were previously closed. And that naturally raises anxiety. And in some ways, it should raise a little bit of anxiety because we're primed to look out for danger and to take care of ourselves and others. So it makes sense to say, is this safe? Is this safe for me to go out, or is it safe for me to go have dinner somewhere? And the answer is we have to first follow the guidelines from the CDC and from our towns and schools and local organizations. And it's probably very tempting to look at what other people are doing in other cities or towns, but it's really important to start by taking a measure from wherever you live and using that as the best thing you can do first. So the first thing I'll say about anxious adults is to be aware of your own emotions, right? And so I think on one hand, being anxious as a parent or an adult is hard for sure. And you also don't want to transmit that anxiety to your child. And so you really want to keep those emotions in check as best as possible. And sometimes that's harder and sometimes it's easier. Some days are worse than others. But I think this is where we look to our village of our spouse, partner, extended family, older, siblings that are adults. I look to my sister a lot to just kind of be a reality check and a sounding board. So I'll leave it there, but if people have other questions about adults, please let me know because I'm happy to answer them. So we have a couple of really great questions here, and I'm going to start here. My son says he doesn't want to go out until there's a vaccine. He's terrified of getting sick or getting us sick. He's always been anxious, but this is a whole new level. What should I do? So I think this is a really great question, and a couple things that perk my ears up are he's always been anxious. And I think for kids that have a predisposition for anxiety for whatever reason, times when there's more stress can absolutely peak anxiety that was either sub-threshold or actually all at the threshold before. And so one inclination would be to just say, all right, we won't go anywhere until there's a vaccine. But that's like kind of an unrealistic expectation to set because we just don't know when that's going to happen. There's also an inclination to make our children feel better by saying something like, you're going to be fine, or you don't need to worry about that. But clearly, if a child is expressing something, we want to both validate their concerns and figure out sort of a middle path or a happy medium of what's the appropriate amount of reassurance and then not too much reassurance. So in this situation, you might first know what sort of guidelines are around going out or what information you have, let's say, about things loosening or places that are open, and then think about what you're doing in your family and what seems reasonable. And then give your child information. So you might say something like, I know you really don't want to go out until there's a vaccine. And I really understand that you're worried about getting sick or worried about getting us sick. And while I can't guarantee with 100% certainty how things are going to look, I can tell you these are some things we're doing to keep safe. This is why we have gloves or masks. This is why we wash our hands when I come home from the grocery store. So kids do really well when they understand what steps we're taking as adults and what steps they can do. I also think that the harder part here is we might be inclined to just say, well, we don't have to go out today, so I'll deal with this worry maybe a month down the line. But I actually think for a child that's maybe showing some hesitancy even to leave the house and go out, let's say a few steps out the front door in the front yard, those are actually the moments to push a little bit and practice doing what we call exposures, which are just sort of a fancy way of saying practicing being brave in a situation that's hard, right? So you might say, you know what would be good practice for us is actually when I go get the mail, I want you to come with me. It's 60 seconds of going to the mailbox practice. And while it might seem like not a great idea, it actually is going to help your child take some really small steps. Another question, and then we're going to take a quick break and come back. So we just tried to see my parents for the first time. They've missed my 4-year-old so much and vice versa. But when we got to their house, he wouldn't get out of the car and started sobbing that he didn't want grandparents to be sick. It was terrible. We tried to be careful about what we said around him, but I guess we failed. What do we do? So the first thing I would say is you didn't fail. I imagine that like many other parents, and I put myself in this category, we're just doing the best we can right now. And so, yes, we're trying to be careful about what we say in front of our kids. I know for me, I know my 9-year-old doesn't always hear me when I call his name to do a chore, but he sure hears me when I'm talking about something that I don't want him to hear. So we do want to be careful about what we say. But really, saying I've failed is really not going to be very helpful and is not going to really get yourself through the moment. So I would say, what is happening now? What can I do now? And so I don't know what this person did in the situation, but I think if the child gets to the grandparents' house and is really upset, one idea would be to leave and go home. Another would be to try to argue and sort of fight them to get out of the car. And another would really just be to validate how worried they are. I know you don't want to get grandma and grandpa sick. We, mom and dad, or dad and dad, or stepmom have decided that this is safe for us to do right now. And we're actually going to visit with grandma and grandpa. And I really hope you can open the door to the car and we can just practice today, taking a small step, which might be having grandma and grandpa 10 feet away and just chatting with Johnny while he's in the car. Again, might seem like a really small step, but it's going to be one small step toward a larger goal, which would be the thing that seems just really hard. So I love some of these questions coming in. My son doesn't want to talk to anyone. He has selective mutism, was at least talking to a few friends. Any advice? Yes. First of all, I did record one just about selective mutism, a Facebook Live event, so please visit our archives to see that. Another is to start small by practicing just talking to your child in your own home and maybe getting a Zoom call with someone. It might seem silly, even if you don't plan to have your child talk to that person, but it is one small step, which would be to establish that your child is talking to you, even in the possibility of a presence of someone else. So maybe someone that they were talking to before, maybe a neighbor or a friend, and just getting them on a call where there isn't even an expectation to speak, and just say, I wanted you guys to see each other. It's really good. I'm going to call the child Jackson because that's my son. Jackson, great coming over to the screen. I'm waving to their neighbor. It's so good to see them. And then maybe just play a game with your child with the screen on, even far away from the camera, just to have your child practice speaking to you. Also, to the point of SM, we and other places, but especially Child Mind is offering virtual SM groups and virtual Brave Buddies for just these very specific situations. So I invite you to look that up. But I definitely would say establishing talking in your presence first. So we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and then I'm going to answer this excellent question about helpful phrases. So stay tuned.
The Child Mind Institute is a national leader in children's mental health and learning disorders. In the face of the coronavirus pandemic, we are here to support all families. Whether you need help with remote learning, stress management techniques, or support for children who are in distress, the Child Mind Institute is available to help your family cope during this challenging time. We're here for you wherever you are. To request an appointment, visit childmind.org/telehealth.
So we are back and we're answering your questions about reopening and anxiety. I really love the questions that have come up so far, and I'm going to go back to the questions. So there's a really great question here about some helpful phrases to have at hand for conversations with other families who may not be social distancing or wearing masks during social situations when we're attempting to get out, but with precautions. What an amazing question, and really hard, right? And I think it goes to the fact that probably in life, a lot of times people are doing things that your family might not be doing. And so if I understand the question correctly, you, this particular person, I'm not going to say people's names, but you are going out and you're wearing masks and you're staying safe with precautions, but you see other people who aren't. Your child might be asking questions about what they're doing, or you might just feel like you need to say something. And I think what's really important is to see first if your child has any questions. They really might not. The other thing is to just say, like, every family is different. And in our family, we're following guidelines that we wear masks and wear gloves. And this is what we are doing to stay safe. And I think if your child said something like, well, why are other people not doing that? I think you can honestly say, Jenny, that's a really hard question, and I can't really answer what other families are doing, but I can tell you what we're doing and what we are doing in our family. And I also think that if you're in a place and you don't feel comfortable, you should absolutely feel like you can move away from someone or choose to go to a different location. Obviously, you might not be able to, you could say to someone, I really think you should wear a mask, or I really think you should wear gloves, but that might not lead to the other person doing that. But you can take action yourself. And I also think that you can just tell your child what decisions you're doing as a family. In my house, my son has sometimes said, and doesn't have to do with social distancing, has to do with screen time, how come I can't do this and other kids do? And I'll actually say, that's a really good question. And I don't have the answer to what other families are doing, but I can tell you what our family's doing. Hi, how do we help our 3-year-old learn that people are not running away? He feels people have left because they've run away, as in social distancing and lockdown. And so I think these are really great questions, and I'm so glad that people are feeling comfortable asking them. And I think that the important thing is for a 3-year-old, they're really young, right? And they're making sense of their world by what they see. So to them, it's kind of elegant, right? That a 3-year-old feels like they're running away because that's kind of what makes sense. That's what their brain goes to. And so with 3-year-olds and young children, oftentimes you feel like a broken record because you're saying the same thing over and over again. But don't worry if you're doing that. It's actually okay to repeat some of sort of the same things. Like, we're actually practicing being safe and so we can keep our bodies healthy. People actually haven't run away. They're at home and we will see them soon. Or we can't see them in person right now, but we can video chat with grandma. And I think the thing that's the hardest thing is just that we often have to repeat this over and over again for 3-year-olds, and it's very hard. And it's frustrating for us because maybe we think that it hasn't sunk in, but actually 3-year-olds need a lot of repetition. So it's okay to say to them, it looks like they've run away, but they haven't run away. They're still here. They're in their home. And then maybe show them a picture, show them a video. Really great question. We have one right now from Jenny saying the dreaded mask. One child feels like she can't breathe and people will look at her funny. We want to wear them for appointments. All good questions. And I think the most important thing is to validate both of those experiences, right? So you might be inclined to be like, of course you can breathe. You're telling me very clearly that you can't breathe. So clearly that means you can breathe. Or Of course you don't look funny. Everybody has a mask on, so everybody looks funny. But for those particular kids, that's what feels the most real to them. So saying things like, I know it feels really hot. It feels like you can't breathe. I know that feeling. I feel that too. Or you feel like you're going to look really funny. Let's take a picture and see what it looks like. Or I know this is hard and I know you can do it, because you might not like it, and there are certain things we just have to do. And so we're going to get practice, and with practice, it gets easier. And it might not get easier to the point where we like it, but if we avoid it, it's definitely not going to get things easier. We have another question coming in, a couple of questions. One is, can you talk specifically about how to prepare your child for how school will look different if/when it opens in the fall without scaring them? And how do we prevent them from becoming lifelong germophobes? So such a good question. So first of all, I don't think you're going to scare kids if you just give them factual information without sort of the extra stuff that we tend to put on it because we're nervous, right? So our kids don't really have as much of the ability to think through things as we do because their brains are still developing. So the first thing is, we don't know what the fall is going to look like yet. So to me, unless your school has actually said, we know that it's going to start virtually, or we know that it's going to open, it's hard to say what it will or won't look like. I think if your children are anxious about it, the first thing to do is lean in and say, you're saying that you're worried or you're scared or you don't want to go. Tell me more about that. What are some of the things that you're thinking about? Because really, honestly, I bet everybody on this chat could say 5 different things they might be worried about. Germs, other kids, maybe some kids are worried about math. I forgot how to do math. What if I can't do that? What if they make me repeat a grade? Like, kids think all kinds of things. So we want to first ask what they're worried about. And then we can start to answer and say, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we trust the school and they're going to tell us what we need to do. For example, we're going to wear masks, or we're going to be going at different times, right? And so I think the first thing to do is find out what your children are nervous about. Giving information, but asking what questions do you have, helps to lead the conversation rather than just kind of throw a lot of anxious language like, you don't have to be scared, or we're going to make sure it's really safe, right? We want to give information and then answer questions. I actually think a lot of these are really, really good points and good questions. So things like someone saying, having a lesson with masks on, great ideas. Having a dinner or a game night at home and just having masks on. Anything to practice wearing masks, anything to practice talking in front of other people. Like, a lot of people have things going in the thread, but they all kind of come back to a lot of the themes of small practice, right? Repetition about things that are probably very hard, right? And so I think that it's definitely a time of uncertainty, and the best thing that we can do is lead in our behavior, right? So I'm not going to call out anyone on here, but if you are also feeling hot in a mask, or you actually feel like you look kind of funny, letting your child know that, I think is really helpful, and saying, you know what, actually, I find it really hot in a mask, or you feel like you can't breathe. I want you to know that's actually normal to feel that. When our body feels threatened or our brain feels threatened, we feel like we can't breathe, but I promise you physically are breathing. So what you're noticing is that you're feeling, you can label it anxious or funny, or you feel like you look dumb, and I'm going to help you through those feelings. The second question that someone asked was, how do we help kids not become lifelong germophobes and message when all the messaging we're doing now is avoiding getting germs? And that is a great question, right? And we're going to have to recalibrate ourselves, right? I will admit transparently, there were certain things that I would do 5 months ago that I would definitely not do now, right? And I wouldn't ask my patients to do them because those things aren't specifically safe right now. But I'm hoping when things loosen and things open up, I'm going to find my new meter, right? I am much more vigilant about hand washing with my son. And admittedly, I probably wasn't one of those people before, but I will be, and I'm going to continue to be. Other things I'm going to watch out for. So if my child was saying, oh, I don't want to go to places, I never want to go to playgrounds, I don't want to do certain things that other kids in my town or that I see other people doing, that's when I'm going to say, we need to push things a little bit, right? So I don't think that going to a grocery store, just touching everything and then coming home and touching your face, I don't think that's reasonable. And I don't think it will be for a long time. But I think it's going to be kind of a lot of calibrating and recalibrating to figure out what that new normal is. The last thing I'm just going to say is bringing it back. I really am excited about all the participation on this. It's just to say bringing it back to adults. What about adults and being anxious? And I will say it really starts a lot with us. And so I know for me, I've been a little irritable this week, which is my meter that it's a tough week. And so I need to just be aware of my own emotions. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be irritable or I'm not going to be anxious, but with a little bit of awareness, I can even tell my partner or just tell my son, like, I'm a little cranky today. And I don't know exactly what that's about, but I'm just aware of it, right? So I think as we increase our own awareness about our emotions, then we can just sort of communicate with our village, whether it's your best friends or your partner or grandma or grandpa who are socially distancing but still want to be involved, and just bounce ideas off them. Like, I'm having a hard week, I just need some help, right? I'll also say one last thing before we close, which is one thing I did today to help myself just feel better in a particularly stressful moment was, rather than complaining, which is what I was kind of doing over the last 24 hours, I actually sent an email to a few coworkers and just said, hey, I'm actually having kind of a stressful week, but in my effort to lean into that, I just want to check in and see how everybody else is doing. And I sent a couple of screenshots of funny pictures because that's something I like to do. And I didn't feel better for hours, but I felt better for a little bit, and I kind of felt good that I did that. So I just kind of wanted to share that. We're just going to close, and I want to say that I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope it was helpful, and remember, we're here every day and look through your questions. For those who are asking about selective mutism, please look in our archives of our Facebook Lives, because we did one on selective mutism last week. For those who want to watch this one or share it with someone, we're recording these. So definitely we look to you to go to our childmind.org/coronavirus for more resources, and visit us at childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the different remote telehealth resources we have available during this time. Thank you so much for joining me, and be well.